What is a common mistake that you find many podcasters are making?
Some people that I know that have started podcasts go right into trying to turn it into a business. A podcast it should be a labor of love, right? And like I said, the views, the listens, the downloads that will come. So some common things that I see, even from people that are friends of mine, is they'll start a podcast, and the next episode they're already like, all right, here's my Patreon, here's how you could donate money. You could do advertising on our podcast, and I'm like, you have like 7 listeners. Like, why would anyone pay to? They could talk to 7 people on the street just by walking out of their apartment. So the common thing I would say pitfall would be you monetize too quickly. It's not, that should not be the goal. That would be, obviously that's eventually what we all would want. But don't start with monetizing. If you are trying to tell somebody about your podcast on social media, don't just bombard them with, here's my new episode, here's my new episode, here's my new episode, because now you're just selling things, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that if you do join any form of groups that are like-minded to what your podcast is about on social media, be an actual participant in those groups. Do like other things, do share other people's things, do comment on stuff. You're not just there to promote, because then you just become a salesperson, and no one wants that. Be genuine. Like, hey, I do this podcast. It would be cool if you guys like what I do, but I also like what you do, and I think maybe together we could be one happy history family kind of thing.
How many hours does it take you to put together an episode?
Okay, so the episode is for 10 minutes. It probably takes me about 30 minutes to gather my information all together. And that's already because I have most of the sources I have here. So you figure 30 minutes to gather it. Then it'll probably takes me another 20 to 30 minutes to write it. So we're an hour in. And then it takes me 10 minutes to record it. Well, 15 minutes to record it. So that we're by the time I edit all my ums out, it's crazy. 10 minutes is probably an hour, a little over an hour. And it's a daily podcast, so you could start adding that. It's a lot. But again, I don't look at it as a job. I look at it as I generally am excited to tell these stories. And sometimes, like I said, I'll run downstairs and I'll be like, "Hey guys," and my 12-year-old would be like, "That's great, Dad. That's great." And I'm like, "Okay, that's awesome."
No, you're making a legacy for them.
Shut
I'm sure.
down. I know.
Yeah, it sounds just about right. I have some teenagers in the house too.
Yeah.
Sounds just about right.
So funny.
What's been an effective way for you to promote your podcast?
So promotion is, and I say this even in my intro as well, is tell your friends. So my thing is, if I ever hear from anybody, hey, I listened to an episode you did on blah, blah, blah. I'm like, awesome. Did you like it? Tell your friends. Word of mouth is still very important. I tried various different things to kind of let people know that I even exist, right? Yeah. And the growth has been amazing. I mean, I really only started History Shorts early this year, I think January, right? Something along those lines. So I went from 30 listeners to, thousands of listeners. So it's great. And I haven't really done anything special to have thousands of downloads, each month, which it just kind of happened. But, so sometimes it's about going where people are already there that would like what you do, right? So if you just post something on Facebook and you do a paid advertisement on Facebook, and Facebook will say, okay, we will get this to the right people, but maybe they're getting it to the right people that like history, but not people that ever listen to podcasts, right? So you almost want to join like-minded groups. You want to surround yourself with people that already listen to history podcasts. As opposed to just joining a history group, join a history podcast group, join a podcast group, if you're doing fitness podcasts, then join fitness groups, but also try to find ones that already like podcasts, right? So look for the people that already like similar stuff to what you do. Don't go into the real world and try to find someone that might like a podcast on your topic. Look for the specific groups that already do that. Don't reinvent the wheel, I guess would be my number one advice.
Great advice. Love that.
And guests too. If you want any guests on your podcast, just honestly, if you ever, going back to the whole Dan Carlin thing, I've interviewed multiple Pulitzer Prize winning historians. I've interviewed Medal of Honor recipients. I just spoke to the archivist of the United States, literally, in Washington, D.C. last week. She was just appointed by the president last year. And I just reached out and I was like, hey, you're the American historian. Can we talk? And she's like, all right, I'll check out your podcast. And then she got back to me, Dr. Shogun, amazing. So here I am talking to someone in Washington, D.C., the historian of America, like, and I'm like, this is just me. And that's the beauty of it is, you never know. Just ask. Literally, you have the worst that could happen is you'll get a no, or actually you might not get anything back, right? But all it takes is for one person. There's Adam Grant wrote a book a few years back, givers, takers, and matchers. I think it's just give and take is the name of the book, and he kind of divides people. Some are givers, some are